Hi everyone, welcome to Life Made Simple. Today we are troubleshooting and resolving an oil leak on our 2007 Honda Pilot. So if you take a look here, you can see I've pulled a couple of our ignition coil packs, cylinder 4, cylinder 6, and you can see I've pulled the spark plugs as well, obviously, and we've got oil all over the spark plugs. Spark plug boots, I actually wiped this off a little bit, but you can see there's quite a bit of oil coming through. It's interfering with the spark plugs, and it's happening on either side. As part of our troubleshooting, this is what the rear bank looks like. We've got the spark plugs. I haven't got the third one out yet because there's some rubber in there that's blocking it. But look at that spark plug on cylinder number 3, cylinder number 2, and that's the boot for cylinder number 1. When we pulled these out, they're soaking wet. When we pulled this one out, I mean, it was dripping oil. You can see it's still dripping oil. Spark plug is the same way. Oil all over the spark plug tool. So basically we've diagnosed this to be an issue with the gaskets. We've got the valve cover gaskets that we're going to replace today, as well, of course, the spark plug tube seals. We're going to basically be pulling the intake off, getting down underneath the intake manifold, getting the valve covers off, replacing those gaskets, putting it all back together. We're going to start by disconnecting, of course, the negative cable on the battery. I've already done that here. Just tuck it in a towel, put it off to the side. Next, we're going to remove the air filter box, giving myself some more space. There are 4 8mm bolts here. This basically pops up. In order to remove this, I'm not going to detach the air filter box from the intake hose. All I'm going to do is I'm going to unclip this, put the cable down, return air, just take that off of there. There's one underneath as well. That off itself. Now, just gonna another clip back here. Down, but it will make it easier to get access to that throttle body. So. Slowly work it over there. And pull your air intake. There's 2 nuts and there's 2 bolts holding the throttle body in place. So this is the other bolt. Okay, so with that, the throttle body will slide off like so. You can just kind of leave it off to the side here. So if you're so inclined, I'm going to take a rag, throw some throttle body clean on there and give it a little bit of a wipe before I put that back together. Alright, next to start removing the bolts for this intake plenum. 10mm all around. Okay, so those are all the same ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So those 10 are all the same. And you'll see this is a nut. There's this one over here. There we go. It's so easy. Lift this cover up and off. See, it's getting pretty dirty in there. And this is a upper intake gasket. Next one here, we got 6 12mm bolts, 2 12mm nuts. Great, so now just disconnect some hoses. I think this is all coming up in one piece. Iron clip. Got a hose back here. Hose here. Doing my best to be gentle with these. I don't know how long they've been here for. Probably since the beginning of time. I think this one. Something catching up in here. There we go. Like butter. Okay, whole intake plenum comes off, which of course exposes your intake manifold, lower intake manifold. Now we're going to be replacing these gaskets. So you're going to notice there's this. All going to come off, so this piece comes off. There's a gasket up top. There's another gasket here. Take it off. Okay, now we're going to cover that up. Now we're just going to cover this up. Some people use painter's tape as well. I'm sure that works just as well. Maybe that works even better. But anyway, just cover it up so debris doesn't get in there. Now, we'll work on the front cover, work on the rear cover later. So first of all, let's take off. You can see I already took off a couple of the ignition coils and spark plug. Then I'm going to remove the oil cap, remove the dipstick, probably remove the PCV valve. So as I twist these, just stick a screwdriver in it, pops them up real easy. 6mm hex. Let's see how this spark plug and ignition coil are looking. Not as wet as the other two. Yeah, I could tell by pulling this one out it wasn't liquidy like the others. Alright, let's remove this oil filler cap. Let's remove our dipstick. Let's remove our PCV valve. Should be your typical 10mm bolt here. Saw that or not, but PCV valve was covered in oil. Leaky. Let's hear if let's shake it though and hear if listen to see if it still sounds like it's working. Yep, I can hear it moving inside, so I'll probably give it a clean with some brake clean, but I'm going to reuse it. Okay, next, start removing this rail so I can get this cover off. 1, 2, so just go slide up. this does want to slide up. It's stuck down here. Now, I remember those two plastic clips that I could never get off before. And it's not like I can undo it from that side. So let's see. Well, I can either slip the valve cover in and around that and leave it alone, or I can try my luck with those clips again, because I need to unplug these two in order for this to come up. And I remember the last time I tried doing this, it was next to near impossible, and I decided to work around it instead. Let's try to detach that bolt. Pull this bolt out, this bracket comes free. Well, gives me a little bit of room, but still not as much as if I could. Can I start recording again? Alright, so I've decided I'm going to leave that clip once again. It's just, that's the most stubborn plastic clip I've ever come across, which is okay. All I need to do is I need to get this cover off. I can leave that on. Basically, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts, and they have little grommets on them that we're going to be replacing as well. I feel like I should be gentle with these actually. Probably overkill, but I love this long-handled ratchet. I love a lot of torque with very little effort. That to me just is gentle and makes sense. Okay, technically it should all be 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are what they look like. We're going to be replacing these grommets on them. Let's get this valve cover off. This we might need to. Oh, sometimes it comes off nicely, sometimes not so much. Either way, let's get this baby out of here. So here's our valve cover, here's our old gasket, here's our tube seals. You can see this is torn. This is torn. They're all torn. That would explain the leaking. Okay, so that's one cover out. Now all you have this opportunity, if you want, because you've got the valves exposed, or the lifters I should say exposed, you have the opportunity to do the valve lash adjustment, which is common on these Honda type engines, or a lot of these Japanese engines that are especially dual overhead, but they don't have hydraulic lifters. And so as a result of that, you need to actually do a valve clearance adjustment every so often. I think the recommendation is 100 or 150K. Anyway, while you've got this apart, it's a great opportunity to do a valve lash adjustment. This engine, actually, we did it not too long ago, maybe 60,000 kilometers ago, so I'm not going to bother. I'm basically going to remove the spark plug tube seals from the old cover, replace the valve cover gasket as well, put this back together, and then I'll work on the rear. I'm going to pop these tube seals out. They basically have metal in them, which kind of keeps its form. You can tell they're all busted up here. I can do it this way. That's one way. Okay, just gotta get the right angle, get it wedged in there, and that's it. So I'm gonna give it some brake clean, get the new ones installed. To install these spark plug tube seals, just positioned it in there. to get it in flush. You can feel this is lower than that side. There, good to go. And last one. Last thing, of course, is the valve cover gasket. There's two of them, and they should only go on one way. And this way will it line up? Looks like it will. Now the bolt tightening sequence will help this get squished flush onto the head. Last step for this before I replace the valve cover is I need to get these off, replace them with these. Okay, the quickest way that I found to remove these, basically tin snips work really well, so you don't have to cut the rubber and the metal separately. Just take the tin snips, squeeze, chop through that, grab a couple of pliers, stick it on one side, grab the other side, and just pry it open. Pry it open, piece comes off, top in the garbage, bolt's ready for another one. Alright, we've got a 13/16 deep socket, we got the new grommet there, stick the bolt at the top, and the plan is to hammer it through. I actually want to go in at an angle. There, okay. It's tough, you gotta be careful. These things, like they're brittle, so they don't seem to just kind of go through nicely. I had luck with one where these two were separated, and I basically, pried it on one side and got it around, but that's not always the case. The rubber and this metal don't seem to always come apart. So you can try that method. You got to be careful. Like I said, this rubber is kind of brittle. I think one of them broke. But try that, get them back on. Try to keep everything warm so it's less brittle. And do your best not to break them. Alright, the spark plug tube seals back in. You got the bolts with the grommets. Those were tough. Let's get this valve cover gasket back on. I cleaned the surface around the head just lightly. Now let's put this back in. Ever so gently. Okay, so those spark plug seals should basically go on to those nicely, and so you should kind of feel it snug. Take a look around just to make sure the gasket's not sticking out weird somewhere. Let's see the tube seals, they seem to be seated okay. Alright, so now we'll start these valve cover bolts by hand. There's one that's different, one that's shorter than the rest. That one goes up top here. The tightening sequences, you have to do it in 3 passes. So the way that we need to tighten the bolts here, it's a specific sequence. So this is number 1, this is 2, this is 3, up on the left is 4, and over on the right here is 5. So that's the sequence we want to tighten it in, and we want to do it 3 times. On the 3rd time, we're going to torque it down. So the first one, we're just doing it so it's just basically, I'm going to do it so it's flush. Do this one. want to do it so it's basically touching. And this one here as well. Do it again, just do it a little bit tighter. Now, we gotta torque it down. So it says 8.8 foot-pounds. Now, I don't have a torque wrench that goes down to 8.8. I do have inch-pounds. When I convert that, it's 105.6 inch-pounds. I can't get this to exactly 105.6, so it's either 105 or it's 106. So I'm gonna go with 106. Okay, we'll start with 1 ounce. 6, that's the first one. Third one. Fourth one over here. And then the fifth one, I'm gonna have to bend that a little bit. Actually, I could just remove that. Turn it so I get access. Take this one down. There we go. So 3 times around, third time is tightened to supposedly 8.8 foot-pounds, but actually 106 inch-pounds. Now let's piece this thing back together, and then we'll get to that the rear valve cover. Alright, wiring clips back in, brackets hooked back up. Just giving it a PCV valve, a quick clean. We're going to clean off those spark plugs, put those back in. For now I'm using these spark plugs. I'll probably replace them actually, but just couldn't get around to it right now, so it's fine. I'll get new spark plugs during the week. Anyway, in general, just need a little bit of anti-seize on it. And in general, hopefully I would have cleaned up all the oil. Yeah, ish. Anyway, so with that, I've got my gear wrench magnetic spark plug tool, which I actually love using. And then I'm dropping this back in here. Alright, torque spec for the spark plugs, 13 foot-pounds. Sorry, just before I put the ignition coil or spark plug boot back on, just put a little bit of dielectric grease in there. And then just get it down on the contact. Those, plug it back in. Actually, sorry, stick this back on this rail first. There, on there. These clips. And plug them back in. Alright, that pretty much does it for the front. All right, so I wasn't going to actually talk about removing the rear valve cover because it's kind of mostly the same, but I want to be totally transparent with you guys. That was a royal pain in the you-know-what. The difficulty you have is the wiring harness here. I mean, I've loosened, there's a couple of bolts in the back, 10 millimeter, maybe 3 actually, or actually 2 that you loosen off. There's a bracket off to the side holding all of this wiring. This ground you actually don't need to disconnect. You do need to unplug the fuel injectors, and you just don't have enough clearance. And no matter if you open up these clips and stuff, nothing changes. It's basically held in place by this massive wiring in the back, this one off to the side to the ECU, and then this one that goes down into the engine area. So you basically have to, there's one more bracket down here. So this kind of third one that I was telling you about, this large cable or cabling that goes through here, there's a bracket here with a 12 millimeter bolt, and if you loosen that, that gives you just enough clearance to basically wedge this out. And the way that I ended up pulling it out is kind of lift it, go forward, turn a bit, go forward, turn, go for it. Be careful because there's an oxygen sensor back there. If you push this back too far, you might damage that. And then you kind of end up pulling it this way and getting enough clearance to pull it out. There's a lot of leakage going on back there in those spark plug tube seals. It's not looking so good, so I'm glad we're replacing it. I think the biggest problem is actually putting this back in. So once I get these gaskets and tube seals replaced, putting it back in and trying to keep everything in its spot, I'm just hoping for the best, that it doesn't get all mangled when we put it back in there, and that the spark plug tube seals actually seat properly, because maybe that was the problem previously. Anyway, just wanted to let you know that it was really actually very difficult to get this rear valve cover off, and really it's just lifting up those cabling, getting as much play as you can, so you can basically wedge this out of there, pull it out, and then I'm going to replace all this stuff and try to wedge it all back in. Alright, we're in the final stretch. Replace the spark plug tube seals and the valve cover gaskets on both the front and rear valve covers. Put the wiring back together, all the clips, most of the hoses, bolts. You can put everything back together. So now it's time to replace these gaskets. It only matches and goes in one way. So if we got it correct, all the holes will line up, and if not, then that's it. So pretty foolproof, and I appreciate that. We add a spacer, add on the other gasket. That's that. And now we're ready to put the intake plenum back on. Okay, so here's the intake plenum. Just before we do this, place the throttle body gasket on here. Blade just to get this part off completely. Clean up the surface a little bit. Okay, let's see what goes on this way. This way, I don't think it matters. I was going to do this on the bench, but there's not that much to get rid of, so just do it here. The gasket. Just like that. Now, drop the intake plenum back on here. Okay, that sounds squishy like it's supposed to on those springy gaskets. So secure this on and then we'll hook everything up. So just remember there's 2 nuts and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bolts. So they're all 12 mil. and they're going to be tightened down to 16 foot-pounds. Alright, this should have hit them all to about 10 foot-pounds. Okay, so this should be the last piece here. And again, it's kind of nice because it should only go on one way. And then technically the bolts are supposed to line up, but it does not look like they do. So I'll flip it around because maybe I got it on the wrong way. There we go. It's nice that it only goes on one way. And now you've got it all lined up. If you put it on the wrong way, it'll let you know because the bolt holes will not line up. There we go. Like how that fits on. These are only supposed to be on 8.8 foot-pounds or 105.6 inch-pounds, so I'm just going to use this very gently to get them started, or to get them almost snug, but not quite, obviously. Okay, let's hook up the hoses, get to the throttle body. This. Let's get this throttle body back on. There wasn't a specific order in which it was recommended to tighten up the throttle body bolts, but I remember when I was working on a Nissan Altima, there was a specific sequence, and it kind of went in a crisscross down up. So I'm gonna basically do the same thing. I'll tighten it up that way, and then when it comes to torquing them down, I'll use the same pattern as well. Get the same order. Alright, 16 foot-pounds all around. Alright, so the first part is getting this thing back in. Just try to work your way into it. Okay, and then we gotta feed this up onto the throttle body. On there, and then there's a notch up here, so you just want it lined up there basically. Then you want to take your 10mm, tighten down this hose clamp. Alright, after after you've got that on, just get your hose clamp back in the right spot. There before. Bring this cable up. Snap it onto your intake hose. Underneath there, plug it into the throttle button. Alright, and then tighten down your air filter box with 8mm with an 8mm socket. Now it's time to double check everything before we hook the battery back up. Let's see if we missed any connections or bolts. So here's one, intake clamp. While I'm looking things over and doing my final checks, I'd really appreciate it if you took the opportunity to subscribe to my channel so you can be informed about all of our latest DIY and tool review videos. And if this video was helpful, let me know by hitting that like button. And of course, leave a comment if you have a question or you have better suggestions that everybody else can learn from. We would really appreciate that as well. Thanks for watching and best of luck on your DIY projects.